welcome. My name is Frank Chong, and I'm the president of Santa Rosa Junior College, and it's an honor to be here today. And we have a very, very special speaker, and we're very graced by Professor Rendon. Came all the way from University of Texas, San Antonio, and I was talking to her that I first went to her beautiful city last year and just fell in love with San Antonio and came back, told my Vice President Ricardo, we have to have a conference down there. And so for her to come and visit us here in usually sunny Northern California, but you brought the rain, Professor, and we need it for our grapes and for our water supply. But I think today, and I want to thank Dean Collier, I want to thank all the folks who are responsible for the speaker series. We're going to begin a speaker series to talk about student success, to talk about student equity, to talk about student success and completion. And I've been watching, this is my fourth year starting in January, and even in that short time and being in Sonoma County, I've witnessed the constant changing demographic of the community. And it's something that Vice President Navarrete, who will speak next, has witnessed for over 20 years. But clearly the type of students we have is changing, and we're all about completion. We all want to get students to come to the college and complete whatever aspiration and goal that you have for those of your students, and for our faculty members to really equip you with the type of pedagogy, with the type of insights that's really going to help students complete their course of study and hopefully become fully employable in today's economy. So today we have a very, very unique opportunity to hear from a nationally renowned speaker who really understands about cultural competency, who understands and is expert in areas that I think will be tremendously beneficial to our audience and to our community. So at this time, I just want to welcome you, and I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President of Student Services, Ricardo Navarrete, to introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chong, and thank you for those of you who have braved the cold and wet Sonoma weather to be here this evening to listen to some wisdom and experience from Dr. Laura Rendon. You know, it's really neat to introduce somebody you've read about, and in our literature, in our educational literature, particularly about students of color, this individual, this professor, Dr. Rendon, is a national figure. She has done research that has shifted the educational viewpoint on how students can be successful and what is the institution's responsibility in directing the success of those students. So this is a special treat for me to be with her and to share some thoughts. This is what I would call an intellectual giant in the field of higher education in the United States. So it is an honor. I'll read a little bit about her biography. Dr. Rendon is professor of higher education in the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Texas, San Antonio, or as we say, San Anton. She is also co-director of the Center for Research and Policy in Education. She's a nationally recognized scholar, speaker, and consultant. Her work focuses on assisting low-income, first-generation college students to enter and graduate from college. In 2013, just 2 years ago, the Texas Diversity Council named Laura Rendon as one of Texas's most powerful and influential women. Wow. Right here. Rendon developed the theory of validation. She's going to maybe explain tonight a little bit about the theory of validation. which has been employed extensively as a framework for working with students to guide educators, teachers, and leaders in education on the needs of these particular students. She also developed a teaching and learning model called, let me try this, Senti Pensante. Senti Pensante? Senti.
Senti pensante.
Okay, Senti Pensante, which is a combination of words of sensing and thinking. Rendon is co-founder and past board chair of the National Council for Community and Education Partnerships, past president of the Association for the Study of Higher Education, which is the nation's, our country's, premier scholarly organization focusing on higher education research. So she is recognized by the professional elite in educational research in this country. Dr. Rendon earned a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy in Higher Education Administration from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. She holds an MA degree in Counseling and Guidance and Psychology from Texas A&M in Kingsville, and she earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and Journalism from the University of Houston. And, proudly, she holds an Associate of Arts degree from a community college, San Antonio College. Rendon also attended down in Laredo Community College in her native hometown of Laredo, Texas. If I was to look at her resume and summarize her intellectual theme, I see it as communication. As a journalism writer, as a counselor, as an educator, as a researcher. And what her theories have presented to us is approaches, models of communication between people, the teacher and the student. Dr. Rendon, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me this evening. I know it's kind of cool for you, although I was telling my friends here that if you're in Iowa or in Michigan, this is nothing. But at any rate, great you got the rain. I know you needed it. So it's a pleasure for me to come here and share a little bit about what I know that can help students to be successful. This is a special drawing that was done for us in our center, and you notice the keys in these students' chests. It's the magic key, la llave mágica, and that's to get a degree. When you have an education, like my father used to tell me, no one can take that away from you. No one can take your education away. You've got that magic key. And so for you students that are here tonight, my talk is dedicated to you. This is why I do my work. I do it for you, so that you students, who I share your story, can actually not only get into college, but get through college and earn degrees. Let's see here. Does this need to be turned on? Oh, there we go. Let me begin a little bit about how I enter the work that I do. This is the house in Laredo, Texas, 517 Galveston, that I used to live in for much of my early youth. A very modest house that my grandmother lived in, and then my mom bought it from her for $5,000 back in the 60s. And my house now looks very different from that, but this is part of my origins. This is who I am. Growing up in poverty in Laredo, Texas, having hopes and dreams, but not knowing how to realize them. Wanting to do better than my parents, who had to work, just morning, noon, and night to help the family to survive. And knowing that I had to get an education in order for me to do better and advance myself. But I wasn't quite sure how to do that. I'm also a border woman. Laredo, how many of you know Laredo, Texas? Okay. So it's right on the US-Mexico border. And so growing up in those borderlands, Mexican, American, eating tacos and hamburgers, and mixing up the American part of me with the Mexican part of me, it's a really interesting dynamic, that goes on in our heads without us realizing it. But all of that poverty, all of those struggles, all of those hopes and all of those dreams, and all of that journey that took me all the way from the barrio of Laredo, Texas, to the elite University of Michigan, where I got my doctorate, has been an incredible journey for me. And as I think about it, I think about the assets that you students have and that I had that are often unrecognized and unacknowledged. And so that's going to be part of my topic for tonight, to talk about these assets that students have. Because I think it's time to shatter what I call the dominant deficit-based framework. Often in higher ed, in 2- and in 4-year colleges and universities, we work with this deficit framework, which really goes against equity, it goes against parity, it goes against student success. It's a framework where students are viewed automatically as deficient. It's a framework where students are pathologized, stigmatized. A framework that says these students are too overwhelming, all they bring is problems. And I think it's time to shatter that framework because I think it's wrong. Can you imagine Berkeley talking about students that way? Can you imagine UCLA talking about students as problems? Can you imagine Stanford talking about how students don't know anything and how, people don't want to work with students? They don't deal with students that way. These wealthy elite colleges see every student as a possibility, every student as someone who can learn, every student who brings some wealth with them into the teaching and learning experience. And that's a big thing that I believe that we need to do in higher education today. We need to shatter this deficit thinking and replace it with theories and models that are aligned more closely with the experience, the strengths, and the culture of underserved student populations. We also need to consider, as educators, that structural inequalities work against low-income students. If you have a history of poverty, you know that there is also associated with that a history of exclusion, a history of discrimination, of racism, of stereotyping, a history of unequal schooling, where all the resources were not there for us to learn. I went to schools in Laredo, Texas, and no one there encouraged me really to go to college. A history of unequal school financing, a history of segregated schools, which exists even today, and a history of poverty. Yet, despite these obstacles, despite the challenge of overcoming poverty, the challenge of overcoming discrimination, despite these obstacles, many students like me and you succeed. And the key is, how do we do it? We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of encouragement. We didn't go to the best schools. We didn't have the best teachers. We didn't have the best resources. And yet, I am here today with a PhD from the University of Michigan, and you're here, and somehow you got here, students, and we have to figure out what was it that in spite of all of these obstacles, you're here and you're working hard to succeed. That's how we need to approach education. Not from your problems, you can't make it, you went to the worst schools, you didn't have the best teachers. Let's do away with all of that and begin to think of students and the assets that they bring and how they use those assets, that cultural wealth, to succeed despite the odds. So let's look at what these assets of students are. I want to share with you a study that we did at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And we interviewed students. We wanted to find out what are the positive and negative aspects of the college experience, and we were looking particularly at Latino students. And we wanted to identify their assets. How is it that they become survivors? How is it that they haven't dropped out? So we had focus groups that we interviewed, 47 students there. And then from those 47, we selected 6 that we did one-on-one videotaped interviews. And I'm going to show you some of those videos tonight. So one of the things that we learned is that there is an upside to attending college for students. Attending college is a transition. You're breaking away from high school to go to college. You're breaking away from your community to enter the world of college. And like every transition, it has its ups and its downs. It's like when we get a new job, there's the excitement of that new job. You know, you're making more money, you're meeting new people. But then as you get into it, about a year or two later, you begin to notice some of the tensions involved with that job. Some of the gossiping, some of the, you know, some people getting more money than others. I mean, you know, all transitions carry that. You know, when we meet someone, we're so excited. Oh my God, this is a person that I've always wanted. And then a few months down the line, we're like, well, I'm not quite sure now. These are transitions. They all carry their ups and their downs. The same thing with college. So these were some of the upsides that students talked about. They were really excited about making new friends, about interacting with diverse students, this new experience that they were going to have and learning new things and new perspectives. But then there's the downside, the choque, as Gloria Saldúa would call it, the cultural collision that happens as students move away from their home realities into this brand new world of college that they don't quite understand yet. And that choque, that cultural collision, involves liminality, involves separation anxiety, involves dislocation and relocation, and involves experiencing microaggressions. I think I messed this up. Okay, here we go. So let me talk about the notion of liminality. Liminality is what Gloria Saldúa calls nepantla. It's living between two worlds. This is a picture I took in the U.S.-Mexico border down in South Texas. You know, Donald Trump wants to build a wall. The wall is already there. And so I placed myself, you know, this is Mexico over here, this is the U.S. over here. And I placed myself right in the middle of that wall because I am a border woman. Mexico is in me and so is the U.S. And that is a middle space of liminality. That is an in-between space. And as students go to the border of college, you know, they're leaving their homes and yet entering this new space, they're caught in the middle. Wow, you know, I want to stay connected with my family. I want to stay connected with my friends. But I also want to stay connected to the world of college. I want to learn new things. I want to make new friends. It's that middle space of liminality that students don't get a lot of help dealing with. There's separation anxiety. That's another downside. The guilt and tension associated with leaving friends and family behind and feeling lonely and homesick. Another downside is dislocation and relocation. where students are breaking away from high school or transferring from a community college to a four-year, or moving from one state to another, or even moving from one nation to another. We interviewed, a student from Bolivia, a student from Puerto Rico, a student from South America. Those are big transitions that these students make to come to the United States and enter college. And then there's this whole notion of experiencing microaggressions. These are these jabs, that students feel when they're treated as cultural outsiders, when they're being made fun of because of an accent or the foods that they cook in the dorm, when women are not considered to be good enough for STEM fields and men not being considered good enough for sports. These are just some examples. Experiencing discrimination, experiencing racism. These are all micro and macroaggressions that many students feel on college campuses, and that's another downside of the college experience. And then, of course, there's the issue of money. Not having enough money. Often I had to send money, for sure, to my mom because she worked for $15 a week at a restaurant, and that's all she had, plus tips. So I felt guilty being in college, and so I made sure that I sent her money so that she would always be okay financially. But that took money away from me too, but I knew that I had to send money home to also help the family survive. And then, of course, students talked about how sometimes high school had not prepared them as well as it should have for students to be successful. And they also talked about less than adequate advising, where sometimes they were placed in the wrong academic plan, where they had difficulties registering, etc. So advisors play a critical role with students in giving them the right information. So this chart here basically puts everything that I've just talked about together. Over here is the world of the students. And then actually, there are multiple worlds. It's not just one world. The world of familia, the world of their friends, their peers, the world of work, and many of them are working, the spiritual world, the world of the barrio and community, and if they happen to be from another country, the world of the native country. And so the students are moving from these personal worlds, okay, to get into the world of college, and they experience this choque, or cultural collision, that involves dislocation and relocation, and then they come up with these college world challenges that I just talked about. Now, those of us that were able to do all of this without any assistance, where we just did it, that speaks to tremendous intelligence. It speaks to the intelligence of being able to navigate yourself in unfamiliar territory. It speaks to the intelligence of having guts and motivation and determination. It speaks to the intelligence of being able to learn the world of college with hardly any help. So students have assets. They are not dumb. They have assets. This is a study that was done in the Center for Community College Student Engagement at UT Austin. And they were doing a study of men of color because our male students are not doing as well as women in colleges and universities today. And here's a list of the things that they found make a difference for men of color. Personal connections, a sense of belonging, and someone who believes in them. It's something I call validation. Someone who is the champion of the student. Someone who says, I believe in you. Someone who says, the intelligence that you have is good. The experiences that you bring to this campus are good. I'm going to help you. Here is my cell phone number. Let me see your homework. Let's go over this together. That is an institutional agent engaging in validation. High expectations is another thing that mattered for men of color. And knowing faculty and staff, that faculty and staff believe students can reach these high expectations. The qualities of an instructor that shows genuine interest in students and in the subject matter. Engagement, hands-on learning and applied learning, and validating faculty who care and are helpful, plus study group learning. And this finding also came out in the study that we did, that students want to learn, but they want to know, how do I apply this in real life? What does this mean in my day-to-day experience? How do I apply this information in life? And so faculty need to make these connections. And finally, what mattered for men of color were diversity and cultural competence. Seeing faculty who look like them, learning from different cultures, and faculty who are familiar with students from different cultures. So this is a student that we interviewed. His name is Uriel. And I was very impressed with this young man because everybody came in jeans for the interview, and he came in his suit and tie. He is a twin. He has a twin brother. And they admire very much the Castro brothers in San Antonio. Some of you may know Julian and Joaquin Castro. Julian was mayor of the city of San Antonio, and he's being touted as perhaps Hillary Clinton's running mate next year. Who knows whether that will happen or not, but they're like big in San Antonio. And he has a twin brother. They admire these Castro brothers, and they want to be just like them. And he's now doing an internship in Washington, D.C. So you may just be seeing the next mayor of San Antonio or the next president of the United States, who knows. But Uriel talked about what is it that gets in the way for male students. So here he is talking about that.
I think this kind of traces back to culture. A lot of things that we as males, in college-wise, is that sometimes we have other priorities, other responsibilities. For example, at a very young age, we are very accustomed to just going into just doing any kind of labor. So we have to work to provide for our family. I myself found myself in that situation when I lost my father. Thank God that we had my stepfather, but sometimes there was ways where I had to step in as kind of take care of my mother or my brother. And so because of that reason, I think we sort of have to draw away from some of our aspirations or dreams, and we kind of have to place responsibilities and priorities in place. And we do that by saying, well, as much as I would want to go to get a college education, I have to work to provide for my family.
Okay. So now let's move toward how do we debunk these deficit-based perspectives? What are the cultural tools that students employ to succeed? And we call them ventajas or assets, y conocimientos or funds of knowledge. They're assets and they're ways of knowing. So we looked at Tarayoso's community cultural wealth model. And Tarayoso says community cultural wealth means that students have familial capital, they have social capital, they have navigational capital, cultural capital, resistant capital, linguistic capital, and aspirational capital. That this chart basically highlights the assets that students have. So we looked at this model and we said, okay, are students going to talk about these different forms of capital? And we found that they did, but then we found even more assets that are not listed in Yoso's model. So here are the forms of cultural wealth. Aspirational, the ability to set high aspirations, recognizing the value of education, and remaining hopeful about the future. Uriel talked about how he and his twin brother would talk about going to college and someday making it big becoming politicians and being like the Castro brothers. They set high expectations of themselves. Linguistic capital, the ability to speak more than one language and engaging with formal and informal modes of expression. They know how to speak in the family, they know how to speak in the community, they know how to speak in college. Familial capital, the family was a model of strength and determination. They benefited from consejos, respeto, testimonios y educación, the modeling of the grandfather who worked so hard in the fields, the modeling of the mother who took care of the family. Social capital, they were able to form peer networks. One of the things that Uriel did was he formed the table tennis club at UTSA. And that's where Latinos would get together and hug each other and validate each other and support each other. They had the ability to do this sort of networking and forming study groups and have each other validate and affirm each other. They had navigational capital. They were able to operate in these in-between liminal spaces, to traverse multiple and distinct social contexts, to dislocate and relocate, and to adapt to a new culture. They had resistant capital. They resisted stereotypes. They combated microaggressions. They overcame hardships, such as poverty and lack of guidance and resources. These are the additional forms of wealth that we found in our study. The students had what Jaime Escalante calls ganas, perseverance, the determination, the inner strength. I'm going to do this. They recognized and embraced the sacrifice that needed to be made to attend college. And they had what we call ethnic consciousness. I was really touched with this asset because they talked about how this education was not just for themselves. This education and having a degree was to put something back into the community. This education was to help this world to be a better world. And so they were engaged, for example, in engineering without borders, and as physicians and doctors without borders. They wanted to use their education, not just for personal gain. This was about making the community a better place to be, of helping others. I made it, I'm going to reach out and help you to make it as well. Spirituality was another asset. Employing faith in God. They talked about where times were tough, they would pray. But they also had a sense of meaning and purpose that they wanted to make something of themselves in their lives. And they embraced concepts such as gratitude, goodness, and compassion. There's another form of wealth that we call pluriversal, this ability to adapt and operate in multiple worlds and in diverse educational and geographic contexts. I was undocumented, but now I'm an American citizen. I speak English, I speak Spanish. I lived in Bolivia, and I can live in the US. I can relate to my family, and I can relate to my faculty. This is what is pluriversal in nature, the ability to move around in many different contexts and do quite well with this moving around. Other assets that appear in research include leadership, being community and action-oriented, resilience, the ability to overcome challenges such as dealing with racism and deficit views, financial difficulties, learning and navigating a new institutional culture, and dealing with personal challenges. And students also have responsabilidad, or responsibility, a familial obligation to contribute to the family's financial situation and well-being, with men becoming the man of the house and women taking care of their brothers and sisters and sending money home to help with family finances. Interestingly, there are some studies now that are coming up about what are the assets of African American students, and I'm going to list them here for you. They also have family capital, love and support from the family. They also have aspirational capital in setting high expectations for themselves and saying, I'm going to achieve, I want to get better, I want to do better. The power of dreaming and aspiring. They have resistant capital, resisting inequalities through protests and alternative solutions. They have navigational capital. They're able to move around in different contexts and make the best of limited resources. Social capital, being connected to the community. It also includes generational connections, as well as specific events such as debutante balls, choral competitions, speech and debate teams, and science fair competitions. And spiritual capital, where religious ties serve as an asset, and religious institutions and their members influence local schools, politics, and civic participation. So those are some of the assets that have been identified for African American students. I want to present you with a little case study of one young lady that we interviewed. Her name is Silvia. She was a fourth-year student in engineering. She is what we call a Generation 1.5 student. She started schooling in Mexico and completed it in the US, graduated in the top 10% of her high school class. She's a transfer student, attended 2 community colleges before enrolling at UTSA. She had an Associate of Arts with an emphasis in math and physics. She's majoring in mechanical engineering and planning graduate work in chemical engineering. Born in Juarez, Mexico, previously undocumented. She's married, no kids. First generation student, the first in her family to go to college. Low income, no models of college graduates in the family. So if you see somebody like Silvia, some faculty and some staff people might think, well, you know, she's at risk. She's not going to make it. But Silvia was now pretty close to earning her degree at UTSA. And I put together this map to show you what Silvia did. She's born in Juarez and goes K-7 in Juarez, Mexico. Then she comes to San Antonio and does grades 8 through 12 and graduates in the top 10% of her class. Then she goes to San Antonio College, my alma mater, and she does 1 year of study at that community college, number 3. Then she comes all the way out here to California, to Solano Community College. And she's there for 3.5 years, gets an Associate of Arts in math and physics. And then she comes all the way back to San Antonio and gets into University of Texas San Antonio, majoring in mechanical engineering and chemistry. Now, I put this up in a chart like this because I want you to see what Silvia did. Look at all the movement going on here. Look at all the navigation that she had to do. Look at all the challenges that she had to overcome. Look at her linguistic capital. Look at her pluriversal capital. Look at her capital of, just being determined, having the ganas to succeed. I mean, many students would not be able to do this, let alone adults. But she did it. She did it with hardly any help because she doesn't have any role models in the family to help her to decipher all of this movimiento. But she did it. She did it. So she's smart. She's very smart. And so here is Silvia talking about that choque, that cultural clash, collision that she had during the transition to college.
I'm not sure how to put this feeling, but from going into a high school where the majority was Latinos and speaking a lot of Spanish, even if it was Spanglish, and then going to a community college where going to like calculus classes, all I saw was white males. First, the environment was different because I didn't hear as much Spanish, and just it was a different feeling. The priorities seem to be different from person to person. Like if you speak to someone who's Latino, they speak a lot about their family and what they want to do later on in life, like how many kids they want to have, how they want their house to look And then you speak someone who their whole life had school in mind, and they just have a whole different culture. They just talk about careers and what their parents did, and they got to travel somewhere. So it's just a whole different culture and a different feeling. I don't know how to explain it still, because you still have that feeling.
And here she is talking about moving through those multiple worlds.
College is different, very different. I see it as I have my college life and I have my personal life. When I'm at school, I'm like in school motion. I know how to speak to people about courses and how to do projects and what I plan to do for the future. I want to go to graduate school. I want to do this and that. When I'm with my parents, there's no school talk other than how you do it and how long it's going to take for you to graduate. I don't think they fully understand what I actually do at school. All they see is that I'm going to school and I've been married, I don't have any kids, how long is that going to take? That's pretty much what I'm getting from my parents. And I just think they just don't know. So it's like two different worlds. I live in multiple worlds.
And here's her commitment to her community.
Scared. Because that means if I'm one of the first, I'm pretty much the one setting up the path for the ones that are coming behind me. And that means that whatever decisions I make or whatever path I choose to take, it's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect everyone coming behind me, whether it's my sister, my neighbor, or just any female or Latina that's, the next generation. And that's pretty scary because it's not just me anymore.
So certainly, Silvia coming from Mexico and not knowing the language or some of the challenges, but then Silvia does have some strengths. So turn to your partner and talk about what are the strengths, the assets that you think Silvia has. Turn to your partner. All right, let's hear what you all came up with. What are some of the strengths, the assets that you notice in Silvia? What are they? Yes.
The versatility of her character.
The versatility of her character. Nicely said. Say more.
Yeah, just being able to, talking about like the life that she lives at home and at school, it feels like she's able to acclimate and understand that it's different. So even being aware of that, I think that it's an asset.
Uh-huh.
I would like to know a little bit more about what are the things that she does at school specifically to acclimate.
Okay.
Is she like involved outside of the classes, or is it just, what exactly does that look like?
Okay. Good enough. What other assets did you all come up with? Yes, ma'am.
We talked about her sort of universalness, about how she just, she lives in multiple worlds. She can speak different languages. She speaks the school language of courses and objectives, but she also can talk to her family, and then clearly she speaks Spanish and English, and so she's got that going. It's
Okay.
similar to what she said. But
Very good. Yes. Others?
Well, the resilience. I was
Resilience.
counting the years. She's a student for 7, 8 years. And it doesn't seem to have, dulled her enthusiasm and her aspiration. But there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, very impressive young lady. Yes. Did you have something? No?
Well, we had the same thing.
Which is perseverance? Yes, definitely. So you can see then what I'm talking about in terms of the assets that students bring to college that really shake up, if not dismantle, this deficit view. I mean, students are smart. They can figure things out, you know, and we've got to recognize and understand these assets so that we can leverage them. And if we want to build equity, to really work with these assets in a way that students can feel like they are really understood and that college can be made much more meaningful and easier to navigate, etc. So what are some of the recommendations? What do we do? I think now, as we move toward the future of student success, that we need to focus on building an asset-based student success framework, one that is culturally validating of these students. And so to do that, we've got to get more faculty trained in understanding students, asset-based understanding, not deficit-based understanding, but asset-based understanding of students, and faculty and staff becoming validating agents and what they need to do in the different forms of validation. The focus of change is not so much the student, it's the college. College needs to make some transformative changes in the way that it works with students. Another recommendation is to assist students with that complex transition to college, new programs that assist students to navigate and decode the world of college. For example, having a center for the transition to college. The focus of change is to address the cultural aspects of the transition to college. The whole thing of dealing with microaggressions and loneliness and separation and liminality, etc. Another recommendation is that the college culture builds community, tolerance, acceptance, and a sense of belonging for students. So we've got to provide professional development to assist faculty and staff to deal with issues of equity, difference, and social justice. The focus of change is to really create a culturally validating, in and out of class, institutional culture. And then we need to create high-impact teaching and learning strategies. These are the things that students of color say work for them. They want to know how to apply what they're learning. They like study groups, learning communities, contemplative pedagogy that I'll talk about tomorrow, ethnic studies, service learning, research with a faculty member, and capstone experiences. The focus is to develop a new pedagogic imaginary to deepen inquiry, meaning, and purpose. So I started by talking about me and a little bit about how I grew up and what's taken me to really get a doctorate and, you know, find great success in the world of college. But it didn't come easy. But one of my assets, like these students, is that all of the work that I do, everything that I do, is for students who, like me, grow up with hopes and with dreams, but not know how to realize them. I want to make sure that my knowledge is going to help colleges like Santa Rosa College to do a better job with students. And everything that I am is geared towards that. ¿Quién soy yo? Who am I? The truth is that I am more than what I appear to be today. No one really knows that I am the young girl who wanted nothing more than a pair of moccasins for her 6th birthday. They seemed to be such an extravagant purchase at the time. It was a time when we lived in a 2-room shack with an outhouse. It was a time that I had for so long cleverly blocked from my memory. El dolor, the pain, numbs the senses. I am the high school student who didn't get invited to the senior prom because she felt unattractive. Unlike the girls who found their way into school clubs and organizations, not for what they knew, but for how they looked. The girl who was told by the sponsor of the Future Teachers of America in high school that she would never be a teacher because she had made an F in chemistry. Teachers don't make Fs, she said. She didn't know that I had sprained my knee so badly that I could not walk to school for weeks. But there was no money to see the doctor. No más no había dinero, and this was just the way it was. I am the graduate student who left Laredo to take the risks that my parents were afraid of. The Chicana at the University of Michigan filled with awe at the sheer fact that I was there and knowing full well mi familia did not understand what I was doing or where I was going. Soy la mujer haunted by childhood memories buried deep in my subconscious, appearing to me in dreams of evil spirits, wanting to penetrate mi cuerpo, terrorizing my trembling body. I am a multiplicity of identities that frighten me, guard me, teach me, love me. And so I leave you tonight with really sharing a dream and asking that those of you that are going to work on equity and social justice and inclusiveness and in community, noble work at Santa Rosa College, that you're on a path to creating a new student success imaginary, a new way to help every single student believe that they're smart and that they can learn. A new way that so many more students are going to finish their degrees and graduate and put something good back into their communities. I've given you some of the things that I've learned, but I don't have all the answers. We are all voyagers, as Gloria Saldúa said. And with voyagers, there are no bridges at times. One builds them as one walks. One creates ideas as one walks the path. One finds new solutions as we reflect as a group to work and to learn together and to be really committed to helping as many students succeed as possible. So thank you for inviting me tonight, and I especially want to thank the students for being here. I love the fact that you're here. I'm a community college graduate. Muchas gracias. Good luck to all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lauren?
We have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question that you want to ask Dr. Rendon? Students or
Hi, thank you for coming, first of all.
What's your name?
My name is Mariah Hernandez.
Mariah. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. So my question is, what challenges have you faced when trying to implement institutional change at any university?
Resistance. There are people who are very stuck in their ways. There are people that have been socialized in a different way. There are people who don't understand the poverty experience. There are people who come from very privileged backgrounds, and there are people who are invested in keeping things the way they are. But then I also come across a lot of people who do want to make change. And so I pay attention to them because they're ready to go. What are you majoring in?
I'm not a student. Currently, I am an academic college counselor at a high school, but I'm applying to higher ed grad school programs.
Oh, excellent.
So-
Congratulations. Yes.
So kind of your vision is kind of like what I want to do is create programs.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I hear you need to go up there so that they can pick it up.
Dr. Rendon, my question for you is, through your work, what strategies have you deployed to engage in resistance? We know we have people who really believe in, they will do the work, and other people are willing to learn and do the work, but there are resistance there. How do you engage resistance?
I've learned that in any organization, whether it be higher ed or somewhere else, there are at least 3 categories of people. There are the resistors, that no matter what you do, they will never be with you. There are those in the middle that are waiting to see what happens, that they may or may not go with you, they're kind of checking it out. And there are some that are ready to go immediately, and my sense is that the people that are here are ready to go. So I start with them, okay? And I'm, to tell you the truth, not so worried about the resistors because they're, in most cases, a smaller group. I like to work with the ones that are ready to go and the ones in the middle. And maybe those resistors will join in, but I've got to go where the energy is, where the positive energy is. I've got to go with people that are starting to move. And that's just the way that I've handled things. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And are you a student or a staff?
No, I'm also a college advisor for a nonprofit,
okay. You all
10,000
are so
Immigrants.
young. I'm getting ready to retire, so I see everybody as a high school student.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I currently work with high school students, and I am looking to also go into higher ed for a master's program. But I guess my question is,
Where are you doing your
I'm applying for various schools,
Okay.
so we'll see.
All right.
But my question's a little bit on the parent engagement. I think that a lot of our students are definitely very family-oriented.
Yes.
And I wanted to know if there's any background research on higher ed involvement with parents, especially to kind of involve them in the decisions of their students pursuing higher education.
A lot of the research on parental involvement is more in the K-12 side. There's quite a bit of research on that. Once students get into college, it's almost like, the family stays more to the side because these students are now adults. So maybe your thesis will help to fill that gap in that knowledge. But I'm sure if you do a Google search, there's going to be lots of stuff out there for you to look at. And some of the things that are being said at the high school level can certainly apply to the college level. But yeah, parents are kind of like, right there, they can be extremely supportive and they love us and all of that, but then they can also pull back. They're pulling back at times not because they want to be bad, they're just afraid. Like my mom was kind of like that, when I was going to Michigan, oh my God, she developed this pain in her chest. And she lost I don't know how much weight, y me voy a morir y no me vas a ver, el último respiro que tomo, blah, blah, blah. She put on the guilt trip big time. And my mother passed away in 2010, but I never told her this, although I've shared this story before. But I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I was accepted at Michigan, I was accepted at Houston. Houston has wonderful hospitals, the medical center there. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to go to Michigan because that's really where I wanted to go. And if she continues with this condition, I'm going to drop out of there and go to Houston. That was my plan. So I go to Michigan, I go to Ann Arbor. She had the pain one more time, y luego se le quitó. Everything, some doctor gave her some tablets she put under her tongue, and that did it. So she was just anxiety. It was a panic attack, now that I think about it. She was having panic attacks because nobody had left the family to go to another state. So she had no tools to deal with that. No tools. So I'm proud of her for, having gone through that with me. And of course, when I graduated, es mi hija es doctora, And so she was very proud of me at that time. But when I was first wanting to go, oh my God, it was terrible. All right, other questions, comments?
Doctora Rendon, thank you so much for being here.
And what's your role?
My name is Inez Barragan, and I am a graduate of Santa Rosa Junior College, and I also work as the EOPS director.
Okay.
And I relate very much to your story, other than I did it as a single mom with 2 little girls, going away. But I value your message, what you are bringing to us around asset, recognizing the wealth in our students and really sort of, doing away with this other framework. But, I work in EOPS, and I work with students that, through their trajectory, have internalized so much of this.
Yes.
So that's what I want to hear from you. How do we heal, restore, rebuild? I also find that coming back home, because I went away and I came back after 17 years to give back here, I find myself doing my own healing and looking at the healing that my colleagues sometimes have to do in order for us to really be able to give, right? We nurture ourselves and we heal ourselves in order to really genuinely and with enthusiasm, infect positively our students. So if you could speak to that, please.
Absolutely. And this is the insidious nature of the deficit framework, that students begin to internalize it without even knowing it. And we begin to internalize it ourselves. And we've got to get away from that. You've got a wonderful program here, the Puente Project, that I believe does some of the best work with students in helping them to believe in themselves, in validating students, in allowing them to write about their experiences, in allowing them to write about what they care about and what's meaningful for them. That sort of framework that is in Puente is culturally validating, and it really includes a lot of affirmation for students. Where students, I've talked to some Puente students before, and they'll say to me, we didn't know that people could care about us in this way. This is incredible. They're shocked because their whole life they've been put down. And now they come into another context and look at what can happen when that sort of cultural validation and working with assets is implemented. Transformation can occur.
Thank you for that. And it's a good.
What's your role here?
My name is Genevieve Bertone, and I'm the Director of Student Equity. So thank you. That's a good segue into my question, actually, as we, at SRJC, we have many learning communities like Puente, and a lot of them are now just being formed, including APAS for Asian Pacific Americans, and we have a Connections program, which is also for Latino and low income. We also have Umoja for African American students. So I noticed a lot of your research was based in the Latino community, but I'm wondering how much of the asset framework of the ones that we specifically talked about today, like La Familia, and can be transferred to the other cultural identities, and which ones do we need to really look at for our other communities? Are you aware of those?
I would venture to say that we can take pretty much that whole array of assets and apply them. Now, we need to do more research with the African American community. We need to do more research with the Asian Pacific Islander community, with Native American, American Indian community, et cetera. And I wish I could do all of that, but I'm starting where I'm starting, but there are other scholars that can certainly, pick up and, where I left off and push the knowledge further and lift the knowledge base so that we have more information about what really matters to students. But my sense is, I've given talk, I don't know how many by now, but this must be about the 40th or 50th talk that I give on this issue. And no one has stood up and said this doesn't apply to these students. So I think that we have something going on here with this knowledge base. But I would encourage you to do your own, with your equity funding. And hire perhaps some graduate students or some faculty to do just these little focus groups and begin to ascertain the assets of these different groups and put them together.
Alrighty, mucho gusto. Nice to meet you.
How are you? What's your name?
I'm Jocelyn.
Jocelyn.
I am a student here currently at the JC.
Mhm.
So I kind of want you to see if you could give us some like comforting words for us, the students. For example, in my case, I kind of relate to you. I do work full time. I come to school full time, and I have a lot of responsibility at my job as management. So I do feel sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes like exhausted. There's days, you know, I kind of want to throw the towel and be like, let's just do the working part and maybe save the education for later. What kind of words or what kind of did you do in your life that you felt was like that thing that kept motivating you or like kept you in school for so long?
I think what kept motivating me was the way that I grew up. That I've experienced not having enough food to eat, for example. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to put my kids through that. I'm not going to go through this as an adult. I'm going to get out of poverty, and I'm going to do everything that I can to get out. And so that kept me driven. And I wanted to get my degree as soon as possible because I wanted to get out there and start working and doing something with my life. The same thing when I went to get a doctorate. I finished my doctorate in 3 years. And I just wanted to get it, and you know, there's a lot of work to do. But that's what kept me driven. But may I ask you a question? Yeah, you can come up here because I think they want to pick it up. It's not my rule. But I want to ask you a question because you say you work and you've got all these obligations. What keeps you going?
I feel like we relate on the same thing. I come from a single parent household where my mom is my only provider, and I don't want to see my little brother go through anything that I'm going through, which is hunger, not paying bills, watching how we can't continue without money in our home.
And do you have anybody right now who is encouraging you and keeps you going?
I feel like it's just watching my family needing that provider, that someone to step up and give us that financial help. I feel like I am that person who's responsible to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
Give
you
her
so
a
much.
hand. She's doing great. Other? Okay, we got another.
To say that was very brave what you just did, and I think that's also one of those asset things to recognize the courage.
Absolutely.
And that those decisions day to day are so bold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the fact that you're not throwing in the towel, that's huge, and you have to make that choice every day.
And it's very easy to throw in the towel, and a lot of students do, unfortunately. Yeah. But I would also encourage you to get to work. Are you in the Puente project? There you go. There you go. That says a lot right there, because you've got a huge validating community that is taking care of you. Don't do this alone. So when you tell your brothers and sisters who are coming to college, have them enroll in a program such as Puente, or work with a validating agent, a champion, somebody who's going to be there for you. Mm-hmm.
Hello, Dr. Rendon. I don't have a question, but I want to tell you, you were so inspirational. Sometimes we sit in the classroom or in the office and we think, I'm not doing enough, or, you know, I am all by myself, and, you know, listening to you and speaking about how we can continue motivating students to come back tomorrow and to come back next class, even if they do not too well in the exam is wonderful. And I am actually very sorry. You know, there are not so many people here today. I hope more people come tomorrow. Because as you were speaking, I was thinking I should have told my students. And I told my students, but the problem is, like this beautiful young woman, they work in the afternoon. So I'm going to pressure Mr. Navarrete to invite you again to one of our, you know, staff development days, or to come during a noontime where we can bring our students, because you are such a jewel and an excellent example to our students who sometimes don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So they need to hear people like you and say, I can do it. Sí lo puedo hacer. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I just want to say thank you. You know, we had this idea in Equity about how do we start having these greater conversations around equity? You know, that it's sort of the word now, right? But what does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we live it in our lives? And I think that you just shared with us a beautiful way, right? And a beautiful testimony to how we can hold true to who we are and value the assets that we bring, while at the same time navigating this really alien space to us. And so I want to thank you. And I also, because I've been sitting too with my own sort of frustration around why isn't this room filled, right? And why aren't there people on the floor, right? Because there's so many of us here. And I think I'm leaving though with this idea of that you've planted some seeds in us, right? And now part of it is our task too to take on what we've learned here to others. And you can be sure that I'm going to be letting folks know how they missed out and how sad I am for them that they didn't get to be here to witness this beautiful testimony that you shared with us. So I just want to thank you just for your beautiful message and just your beautiful spirit that you shared with us.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure
Thank you.
to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
I want to thank you too. You've put into research. In my day, in the 60s, when we were at college, and there were very few of us that were Chicano, that's what we called ourselves, our line was, you know what? We've got to find people that can relate to us. And we used to say to others, they can't relate. That was what you've structured, what you've built is substance and research that deals with the relationship of the people in the college to our students. And this is a challenge that is not new. This is a challenge in higher education since my day. We were survivors then in the movimiento in the early days, and you were part of that, Laura, and you still are. So what you've done is, and I want everybody to understand that, especially the younger folks, this is critical because the challenge in higher education in any institution is those resistors. And they want data, and they want research, and they want documentation. And in the old days, in my time, we didn't have it. What we had was intuition, we had our own experiences, but we didn't have validation. And so you folks need to build on the base that she has developed for higher education in the United States. So on that, just that issue, I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. And it makes me think about, thank you, about, there are at least in my mind two forms of equity, or two forms of looking at equity. One is data-based. Of course, like if you say you've got 25% African American students, at least 25% are in degrees. So you have at least some way to measure equity through numbers. But there's also qualitative equity. And that speaks to our behaviors, our policies, and our practices that we employ to help more students succeed. The pedagogy, the validation, the recognition of assets, the asset-based framework, all of that also leads to equity. In fact, the numbers are contingent upon these policies and practices. You cannot reach equity without the policy and the practice being implemented to transform the institution. And so I think we need to look at equity in that fashion as well. Muchas gracias. Have a nice evening.
And Dr. Rendon has graciously agreed to stay and sign some books and to have some conversation with us in the foyer. So if you're interested in joining us, and once again, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you.